The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said, "Amen, amen, I say to you, whoever does not enter a sheepfold through the gate, but climbs over elsewhere, is a thief and a robber. But whoever enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens it for him, and the sheep hear his voice. As the shepherd calls out his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has driven out all his own, he walks ahead of them, and the sheep follow him, because they recognize his voice. But they will not follow a stranger. They will run away from him, because they do not recognize the voice of strangers." Although Jesus used this figure of speech, the Pharisees did not realize what he was trying to tell them. So Jesus said again, "Amen, amen, I say to you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved, and will come in and go out and find pasture. A thief comes only to steal and slaughter and destroy. I came so that you may have life and have it more abundantly." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Jesus said, "The good shepherd knows all of his sheep, and he calls each one by name." I find that a fascinating consideration. A shepherd calling his sheep by name. It isn't surprising that Jesus would tell such a story. In the scheme of things, names seemed to bear a special importance. In the last days of his ministry, Jesus visited the city of Jericho. And word of his coming preceded him, and the people turned out to see the famous Galilean carpenter. And in that town there lived a tax collector. And because of his profession, he was probably the wealthiest and most hated man in the town. But he too wanted to see Jesus. So he climbed a tree in order to get above the crowd. Now, here is the wonderful part of that story. When Jesus got to that tree, he stopped and looked up at that despised man and looked him right in the eye and called him by name. He said, "Zacchaeus, come down. I want to be a guest in your house today." Jesus never failed calling people by their names. And you can be absolutely certain that if you met him today walking on the mesa, he would call your name. He said the shepherd knows his sheep and calls them by name. He is the shepherd. We are the sheep. All of which means God knows your name. And what that says to me primarily is that God recognizes individuality. Think about it, a fold full of sheep. We don't know how many there were, 50, 100, 200. In any case, a fold of sheep. And there was a certain sameness about the sheep. They all look alike to me, but not to the shepherd. He sees them as individuals. They have distinctive characteristics, and he can call each one by its name. Now, that's how it is with God. No one ever gets lost in the crowd. You're never a number. You are never a nameless face in the midst of the masses. You are a unique individual. You have a name, and God knows what it is. Have you ever noticed how Jesus emphasized individuality? He talked to Nicodemus about new birth, about being born again. He spoke to the woman at the well about living water. He told the story about a shepherd searching for one lost sheep and a woman searching for one lost coin. He talked about a father waiting for a lost son. I think a serious problem with many people is the loss of respect for themselves. They have lost sight of their individual worth in the eyes of God. And I'm almost tempted to say that this is the major problem of our day. So many people have a low opinion of themselves. And then, as a consequence, they go out and reinforce it by their talk and their action. What we must never forget is that Jesus thought that each of us was worth living and dying for. Think of that. Christ died for you. The noblest, gentlest, bravest, best man who ever lived, and he died for you. Now, most of us never understood that. Not the singular and individual significance of the death as it applies to us. We know that he died for the world, but we're not sure that he really died for us, you and me as individuals. Listen to that phrase from St. Paul's letter to the Galatians. He speaks of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. The Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Notice the first person singular pronoun, me. Paul uses it twice. He loved me, not he loved us, he loved me. Not that he loved the world, though both of those are true, but he loved me as an individual. His eternal, infinite love somehow focused in on me, and he gave himself for me. Which means God knows your name. God knows where you live. God knows where you work. God knows where you go to school. You are an individual with God. And in his eyes, you are more important than the material universe and everything in it. This kind of loving, this kind of giving, calls for a response. And our best response is to follow him. Jesus says, I call my sheep by name and they follow me. What is the quality in life you most deeply admire? What's the quality in life you most deeply admire? I can tell you mine. Unselfishness. I admire a person who can give without gain, who can forget himself or herself in the interest of another. It isn't easy to do, particularly in our culture. Even our human nature militates against it. After all, our motto is, look out for number one. No one else is going to do it. Look out for number one. And our question is, well, what's in it for me? The behavior of Jesus flies in the face of both that motto and that question. Jesus was never too poor to give. He was never too busy to help. He was never too tired to love. With family and with friends and with total strangers, he was the absolute model of unselfish living. It isn't a general challenge thrown out to us saying, follow me. It isn't a general challenge thrown out to the world. It's a very specific and personal thing. He calls you by name and says specifically to you, follow me. It has been said that the most beautiful music in all the world is the sound of your own name. Well, if you listen in the quietness of your heart, you will hear that music because God knows your name. And he calls you as an individual to follow him.